This presentation will explore two questions. How do human geographers do research, and what does this mean for producing contemporary geographical knowledge? This is explored through an interview conducted with geographer Matt Finn.
Overall, Matt's research, from what we gathered, focuses on education, particularly how it varies around the world in and between countries. This is further accompanied by his interest in young people's lives and their importance in the geographical world and contribution to academic literature. In terms of Matt's journey, he actually started practicing physics, but decided after the first year this degree was not for him, as he was more interested in questioning people. This promoted him to working within schools, and after conferring an international educational consultant, he was able to do some teaching within schools in India and Kazakhstan, encouraging him to question how education comes together. Therefore, he transferred to a geography degree due to its broad and extensive discipline, finishing with a master's and PhD. So his master's focused on using the rising use of data in education settings, as he recognised the lack of research on how schools were producing data. Hence, two main questions stem from his research. How do schools make data, and how did that change the ways pupils and teachers were thinking about the future?
A big point of contention when discussing researching children is how this research can be done ethically with proper consent to produce knowledge that is accurate and did not negatively harm or affect the interviewees. Matt divided the ethical concerns of research with children into two categories: institutional ethics and ethics in practice. Institutional ethics involve understanding possible research challenges and figuring out how to mitigate them prior to research being conducted, so that the research can benefit young people rather than harm them. This idea fits in well with further reading we had done to understand research ethics, especially regarding young people. In their reading, Horton, Pyre, and Tucker introduce four main characteristics of ethics while researching children that clarify on points Matt mentioned in his interview. Firstly, research must be participatory, meaning that researchers are working with children as opposed to on children, meaning consent must be given from the young people as well as the researcher. Another characteristic is to be critical, which means to understand that reducing young people to their categories of child or childhood can bring about socially constructed norms, like a lack of agency or power, that are not necessarily true and should be addressed as such. The third characteristic is to be diverse, meaning that researchers should consider other aspects of young people's lives and how this can impact their answers, from everyday activities to politicized and marginalized spaces young people exist in. The final characteristic is to be inclusive, meaning that research methods should be accessible, empathetic, and age-appropriate for the young people interviewed, so that they can interact with the research on a level that they can completely understand. While talking to Matt, he touched on considering things like culture, informed consent, and agency as important factors to ethical research, which Horton, Pyre, and Tucker's four categories discuss and expand upon. However, Matt further detailed that understanding limitations and possible issues before researching is necessary, but there will also be issues that prop up during research that were previously unaccounted for, falling under the ethics in practice label. Cultural differences can extend from whether a parent or child is the one to consent in the research, to the ethics of paying or not paying participants due to money possibly causing coercion and biased answers. A counterpoint can also be made, however, that collecting research is taking something from participants, and it would be more ethical to give some sort of compensation back, be it money or material goods. The Horton et al. Reading also introduced the idea of research fatigue, saying that if the benefits of research are not apparent to the people participating in said research, they can become disenfranchised and less willing to participate due to lack of benefits that directly affect them. What is clear, though, is the importance of understanding and accounting for ethics while researching, both before and during the process, to mitigate the harms of research on young people.
When we discussed with Matt about how he gains funding for his research, he highlighted that different groups of researchers gain funding in different ways. Researchers who are employed by the university to just carry out research and not teach must gain their funding from outside parties, funding councils, or charities. The group that Matt is part of is Education and Scholarship. This group teaches and researches. This allows him to gain funding from outside parties, but also has university funds made available to invest into research. There are multiple sources of funding that are made available to academics. One source is from the government, through the UK Research and Innovation Council. Geographers gain most of their government funding from the Economic and Social Research Council and the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The former council would offer funding to projects like augmented reality and artificial intelligence, for example. The latter council would, for instance, offer funding to groups wanting to increase sustainability in the textile and clothing trade. Money offered by these councils is funded ultimately by the British taxpayer. Another funding source is charities or philanthropic institutes. They would often provide funds to better social causes, such as Greenpeace offering money into climate change research to discover knowledge and allow for greater understanding of issues. A final funding source Matt highlighted was student fees. UK home student fees are capped at £9,250 a year. This is often not enough for sufficient research. Thus, higher fees charged to international students greatly subsidise British students and universities, as it provides much greater funding for research. There are some complications around research funding. Of all research bids put forward by universities, only 5% actually gain funding, and of this 5%, the majority is given to older, white, male researchers. This can be damaging, as funding bids take multiple weeks and months to develop, so if they fail to achieve funding, this wastes lots of time and resources. Finally, an ethical issue around funding is the use of students' fees. Students would want their fees to be invested into their education, so having their fees used for research which may not benefit their education is a concern many students believe, which was highlighted by Matt. However, if the funding does benefit the student, having more researched and knowledgeable academics directly benefits the student's education, as they can share their knowledge and better the student's educational outcomes.
Matt often has to conduct research involving children in challenging environments. All research needs to be risk assessed, which involves identifying hazards and establishing how these dangers can be minimised. The university has a responsibility to make sure all fieldwork is carried out safely. Matt told us about the challenges of working in areas of conflict and how sometimes you need to consider how wearing lots of protective clothing can actually put you at a level of risk as you're more noticeable. Instead, it can be helpful to partner with academics in these challenging areas, such as Kashmir and Sub-Saharan Africa. These researchers will already be situated in these places, providing access, and may also have connections with communities to help facilitate the research process. Especially when researching in difficult areas with vulnerable communities, this can help with researching ethically and allowing participants to feel more comfortable.
In terms of research being relevant to the future, geographers, specifically children's geographers, work with a variety of organisations, including governments, charities and agencies, to ensure the lives of children are improving. Matt's main ambition with making his research relevant is the aim of creating an online network community in which schools and universities from across the world allow students' voices to be heard. Through this idea, universities host and coordinate student ideas, with these being crucial in current world issues. Without these voices, there is a range of perspectives being missed. Furthermore, it also allows schools access to safe filtered data, which can be narrated in different cultural contexts, with students being able to learn about other places. However, he is unsure of whether this idea will occur.
Matt, having his own experience with dyslexia, brought about more passion in his research, as he understands the lived reality of people with disabilities who he intends to interview and conclude research with. His lived experience influences the geographical knowledge he produces. Matt wants to bring to light the fact that most researchers into these complex areas are able. There are several discourses within the community about understandings of disabilities, and so having researchers with lived experiences can show a different perspective on complex issues. These researchers move from communities, which allows them to be attentive and inclusive when producing a geographical knowledge related to disabilities. For example, when looking at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the use of masks meant a lack of visual cues and more reliance on eye contact, which proved challenging for their communication. This highlights the importance of considering disabilities when producing geographical knowledge. Understanding and accounting for disabilities when researching opens up previously unexplored perspectives, furthering research into communities that previously weren't given a voice in the academic sphere. Matt believes that his faith influences his research in many ways, but this may be subterranean. Though he finds this question hard to answer, as he wasn't certain that the influence was necessarily Christian-orientated. He believes Christianity influences ways in which he thinks regarding certain questions on inclusion and social justices, including individuals' values and dignity. Research becomes more inclusive and critical when understanding how your cultural context and beliefs can impact how you interpret the morals and beliefs of people from different cultures. Being critical of this aspect allows for more multifaceted thinking and again includes more perspectives and voices in research that do not fit within the Western academics' ideas of the world. However, To conclude on this point, whilst Matt would like to think that his religion influences research, there is no conclusive answer.